Bad boys, what you gonna do? What you gonna do when they come for you? Bad boys, bad boys. Welcome to Pegwarmers, I'm Kevin, and I'm here to talk about toys. Recently, I spotted some artwork by Bart Sears online. It was pre-production artwork for the C.O.P.S and Crooks toy line by Hasbro, and I want to talk about it. C.O.P.S and Crooks was a toy line released by Hasbro in the late 80s. It was sort of scaled up G.I. Joe figures set in the not-too-distant future. They had O-ring construction, but they had swivels at their wrists. A little bit larger detail. They were pretty muscular in build, and they actually had multiple body styles, which was pretty unique for a toy line of that era. Whereas G.I. Joe, everyone was 3 3/4 inch and pretty much the same beefiness. There was a skinny buck, there was sort of a standard buck, and then there was kind of a big boy buck in this line, which gave the characters a little bit more variety, and that was kind of a fun feature of the toy line. Bart Sears, who went on to become a pretty famous comic book artist, doing the Brutes and Babes panel in Wizard magazine for years, was hired as a toy designer, basically probably freelance, doing some sketches for the G.I. Joe line, designing Star Viper and Skidmark, as well as some of the Battle Force 2000 guys. He also worked on C.O.P.S and Crooks. This was around the same time Mark Pennington was doing a lot of the development for G.I. Joe. The two of them were friends, and they also both left Hasbro in a similar time period. Bart has a very unique style, a lot of lines, a lot of extra detailing, and it's something that kind of made C.O.P.S stand out from G.I. Joe. While the G.I. Joe characters had lifelike paintings on the front of their packages, the C.O.P.S figures had smaller sort of busts on the fronts of their packaging, but it was done in this very detailed style. On the back of their box, there was some artwork showing off sort of a lineup of the good guys and the bad guys, and that artwork seems to be based on these concept sketches that Bart posted on his website. I'm going to talk about the different characters from Wave 1 that Bart did artwork for in no particular order. Some of this artwork is very spot on for the figures and the final packaging, and others was changed quite a bit. Bart also was one of a couple of artists that worked on the 15 issues of the C.O.P.S comic book from DC Comics. Some of the best covers from those issues were the Bart covers. So first up, we've got Buttons McBoom, who is one of the coolest bad guys in the line. He's a pretty standard-looking gangster, but he has a flip-open panel on his chest that reveals hidden machine guns, and he comes with a Tommy gun that he can store in a cello case. This was a cool figure in a bright magenta suit. The artwork shown here is pretty slender compared to the final Buttons McBoom, who used sort of the standard, fairly muscular body build from this toy line. But it's pretty accurate to what the toy looks like in the sense of the accessories and his outfit and things like that, and pretty much matches the back of the package. Next up, we've got Highway, and you do have to remember that the Highway Patrol was sort of the coolest of cool in this era, so having this, like, Harley-Davidson riding futuristic cop on a skimmer vehicle instead of a motorcycle was pretty cool. And then, of course, there was a motorcycle in this line, the Blue Streak motorcycle, which everybody put Highway on. So here we can see him on his skimmer vehicle. There is a little siren on the bottom, or a light on the bottom of his vehicle, which I think that was changed in the final artwork. But other than that, this pretty much matches up. He looks great. He's got his pistol in his hand. He's, holding on to his skimmer and looking down. His legs look super long from this angle. It's a pretty neat looking figure. Next up, we've got Rock Crusher, and Rock Crusher changed a fair amount here. He is covered in chains, and he has a spiked ball for his weapon. Now, the final version of Rock Crusher did have, like, shackles on his wrists and ankles, but he didn't have chains, like, dangling from his neck, and his weapon, his mace, his club, was a more futuristic ball and chain type device, not this spiked ball. His artwork on the back of the package used a similar appearance, so similar pose to this, but it was reworked to change that accessory. You will notice that all of this artwork is stamped confidential Hasbro. These are scans, I guess, that got returned to him or something like that, but they were stamped after they were scanned into Hasbro's official system, and Bart was actually selling prints of this artwork on his website, so you can always check that out if you're interested. Bulletproof, the leader of the good guys. This is the techno detective here. Bulletproof was in a terrible accident, and a good portion of his body was replaced with bionics. The big difference here between this artwork and the artwork on the back of the box is so much more of his legs are exposed as mechanical. The fabric is like a clean line here at the bottom of his trench coat, but on the final toy, his pants sort of are scalloped in a way that hides more of the techno details, and the artwork on the package reflects that. Here we've got Long Arm, and Long Arm was sort of the poster boy, the standard beat cop from this line. For a futuristic toy line, they certainly picked an old-fashioned police officer uniform for him with the boot cover, spat type things, but his futuristic handcuff that launches from his wrist so he can catch bad guys on the run is pretty neat. The toy was never as cool with just this little string that you pull through as the animation or the comic book art made it out to be, where it launched with the chain and the cuff was open. But a neat concept, and it was always cool to have sort of a basic cop, a basic patrolman in this line. So Long Arm was definitely one of my favorite characters. Berserko. This is the big boss's nephew. Part of the comic relief, kind of the dumbest crook, other than maybe Rock Crusher. And he's got two large guns here. And his shirt says, "Make my day, Copper," in this production artwork. The final figure said, "Bad is good." So that was one change made to this guy before the final figure and presentation art were done. Here we have Sergeant Mace. His production art does not show his jetpack backpack at all, but he does have his padded sleeve and his large bazooka, as well as his other smaller gun there. It's pretty good artwork of the character, and pretty much what ended up on the final packaging. Bowser and Blitz. This was the first cop I owned, personally, and I always liked action figures that came with pets, so having a robotic dog was pretty cool. Bowser has the padded sleeve and boot like a dog handler might. In his padded hand, he has some sort of a handle with a techno doodad on the end. Is this some sort of electro leash for Blitz? It's hard to tell. He did not come with an accessory like that at all in the final toy line, and on the final production art, they moved the gun mounted on the side of Blitz to Bowser's hand, and then his large padded hand was holding his smaller pistol. It was always neat how those accessories, like Bowser and Blitz's big weapon, could be mounted on the robot dog or held by the cop. Here we've got the big boss in kind of his classic "I'm angry" moment, using his metal fist to smash a table. This happened a lot in the cartoon and the comic, and obviously here in this pre-production art. But why doesn't this work when you're selling the toy? Well, the figure doesn't come with a desk he can smash. They would save that idea for years later for the Spider-Man toy line, so J. Jonah Jameson could pound on his desk and rattle all the stuff around on it. A desk that you could break would be kind of funny. But Big Boss was a big figure, used a lot of plastic. You can actually see his weasel is flying up into the air in this picture. Later artwork would have him sort of holding the weasel and his cane, or, just sort of a similar design here, but minus the desk. I have a feeling Hasbro's legal team came back and said, we can't show him with accessories that he's not coming with. Here we have Barricade, who is another one of the early Cops figures I had. Super cool figure. He's got this full padded suit. He's got a gas mask. He's got a riot shield that's made out of clear plastic, and this giant battering ram weapon. But boy, in this artwork, they really hid the figure. One of the coolest things about this figure is his helmet. So this was redrawn for the final product art. But I like this pose. It's very dynamic and very cool looking. Here we've got Sundown, the cowboy of the group, launching his bolo out of his backpack. His hat looks kind of tall in this artwork, but this is overall pretty much the way he looks on the final product art. The one I saved for the end here is the figure that changed the most. It's not just like a minor tweak, a little change. This character's look changed significantly. This is Dr. Bad Vibes and his Buzzbot. And as you can see in this picture, Buzzbot doesn't have his little brain dome. But other than that, Buzzbot's pretty similar. But Bad Vibes has changed an incredible amount. He has exposed socks with little garters on the production art. He's wearing like an Argyle sweater. He has like a techno cuff on his hand. No real hair to speak of. Very Poindextery glasses. They made him so much more of a mad scientist than a nerd in the final version. And Bad Vibes is one of the coolest figures. He got a lot of time in the cartoon. He got a lot of time in the comic. His crazy bushy hair and his weird glasses. His like lab coat with purple gloves. He's a cool figure. And I'm really glad they made these changes. But this piece of artwork is what made me want to talk about this. Because it's so strange and so different. And I love that the concept got this far before they changed it. I mean, this is a pretty final piece of artwork, or seems like a pretty like finished piece of artwork before they redid him as the Dr. Bad Vibes we know and love. As a kid, I only had C.O.P.S from Wave 1. I did go on to get a lot of the Wave 2 figures in my collection. I don't have a complete C.O.P.S collection, but it's pretty far along. There was also a third wave planned. Bart did some work on that third wave in the design phases. If that's something that you guys are interested in and want to hear more about, I could look into that and try and do an episode about Wave 3 and some of those designs that were never produced. But Wave 1 of C.O.P.S was a lot of fun. I got a few of the figures on my own. Then, because I became friends with Doug Mensch's son, my best friend growing up, Derek, his dad wrote the C.O.P.S comic book. I didn't know that when I met him in elementary school. I actually was kind of confused because he would bring in comics for another kid in our class that he was friends with, and they were the issues of C.O.P.S as they came out. I had no idea that the reason Derek was giving away those comics was because his dad wrote them. But after I became friends with him and started going to hang out at his house and playing with him, he had pretty much all of the Wave 1 C.O.P.S figures, and he and I would play with the toys all the time, and I slowly built up my collection more and more. It was a fun line. It was neat that they were bigger, but they still kind of had that feeling of G.I. Joe. The file cards on the back told you a lot about the characters. Those were written by Larry Hama, who wrote the file cards on the G.I. Joe packages. It was interesting they went with DC for the comic this time instead of Marvel. Doug wrote that for 15 issues, and he did tell me that when he worked with Hasbro, they were very big on, be ready at any point in time to introduce new characters as we, develop new toys. They didn't really get to that point with the 15 issues of C.O.P.S. They didn't go on to the Wave 2 characters. Doug did introduce a few characters of his own that he made up as villains in the comic. There were also some characters in the comic and also the cartoon show that was made that were not actually made as toys. Some of the female cops and things like that, female crooks, misdemeanor, and mainframe never got toys. But overall, C.O.P.S was a great line. If you played with Cops and Crooks as a kid, let me know in the comments down below. I feel like the cartoon show people know better than the toys and the comic. People didn't know that it was connected. The cartoon kind of outlived the line and played on TV for a while after the comic book and the toy line just vanished. And I never really saw the Wave 2 guys in the stores, I feel like, because I feel like I would have been interested in them, but I never really got any of them until I became an adult collector. As for new to the collection, I don't have it here in front of me to show you guys, but I will tell you about it. Carson from 3D Joe's just released his Collecting the Art of G.I. Joe hardcover omnibus. This is a huge book. It is heavy. It is enormous. Large print pictures of the artwork of G.I. Joe. The paintings made by Hector Garrido of the characters, and later Doug Hart and other artists as well. It's one of the things that kind of made me want to do this episode. In addition to seeing this artwork recently, I've been looking through the design artwork for the G.I. Joe line and the branding and the way they sold us on the characters and the merchandising and everything. Carson did a fantastic job with this book. I've talked with Carson many times at different conventions. Most recently, he was at a New Jersey collectors convention, and I spent time with him having lunch with Carson and a couple of my buddies, and he does a really great job on everything he does. The video production he does, the book production that he does. He's got his own Operation Recall toy line that he's doing through Kickstarter, where he got a lot of the people that worked on the original G.I. Joe line, like Kurt Bazigian and Ron Rudat and Doug Hart, to go back to work to create new characters. He can't actually have them make G.I. Joes, but they are as close to G.I. Joe as you can get without putting the name G.I. Joe on the package. All the people that made G.I. Joe made these figures. They're O-ring style figures. And the concepts were pitched by people across the toy collecting community. So it's a really neat project that he's got going on there. So, if you ever need information about G.I. Joe, check out 3djoes.com. I highly recommend picking up this book when he does the second printing, because it is phenomenal. Happy New Year's, guys. I hope you enjoy this first episode of 2024. I am trying to map out the year a little bit, try to have a few more ideas on paper to help execute better episodes, kind of give you guys more of what you want, hopefully. And, I really appreciate all of you guys that have supported the channel over the past whole bunch of years, whether you've been here since SEO Tour Review or you came around for Pegwarmers, the first year of Pegwarmers or these years of Pegwarmers. I really appreciate those of you that watch the videos. Do me a favor, hit the like button, consider subscribing, leave a comment. All those interactions help show YouTube that these videos are worth sharing with other people. If you want to support the channel further, consider joining us on Patreon. But once again, guys, thanks for hanging on the peg with me.